Is a student sample. I'm gonna walk them into the activity, and I'll kind of demonstrate what I expect the student to be doing during the activity. First, if you look on the screen below, you'll see I just wanted to highlight our guiding questions um, for our project. Thinking about how can students be given options to choose media? Will students have the skills to use media effectively? How can students reflect on the process? How can students use digital media platforms to compare and contrast a variety of sources? See, look at that. Made a correction, just like a student should. How can students gain the skills necessary to navigate media and reflect on the process? So, this is what a student would do for the fourth grade uh, lesson plan for this project. So myself and Matt, he teaches ninth grade, I teach fourth. This is what I would do with my fourth grade ESL class to with those questions in mind. So the students begin with this worksheet. They're given it, and this will be the guiding questions following the first activity that they do. So they'll have this at their group, and what they'll be instructed to do is go to Choose the News Part 1. And what it is a Padlet. And students will see a bunch of news sources. So we have the Woonsocket Call, our local paper, the Juneau Empire, another state newspaper, very different content, also locally based. There's a blog, PressThink, the Huffington Post, for a more left-leaning paper, the BBC for kind of world news, National Public Radio, once again, world news, national news. I have a Twitter feed for PBS NewsHour, and then Fox News for something maybe a little bit right-leaning. And students in small groups will look at the news sources below, the headings, and we have 3 headings, and they're going to drag and place each news source under the heading that they think it belongs in. And then we're going to go into part 2. So the first heading is which news source that you looked at covers the most stories. So they'll have to look at all these sources, and they'll drag the one that covers the most articles or most different content. The next category right here, which news source shows one point of view? Do any of these sources only show one way of thinking? Would only one kind of person like this news source? And the last one is which news sources are reliable? Do any of these sources show many points of view? Could many different kinds of people find news using this source? Does the information seem true? So, let me just give you an example. Which news source that you looked at covers the most stories? I think if I was a student, I would first click on the BBC, and then I can look at their homepage, and I'm just going to instruct them to just looking at the front pages. They don't really need to go into the articles. They can just look, but already on this first page, I see news from coming out of Pakistan, Scaramucci and his colorful language on Rice Priebus, Russian uh, retaliation, so what the Kremlin's up to. We have sports, we got weather from all over the world, all different things, many different headings, just a lot of content. So immediately, if I was a fourth grade student in my class, because they are so exceptional, I would immediately put that under this one covers the most. Then we look through the rest. So we can look at a Twitter feed. And I do see a lot of news. I notice it says PBS NewsHour. And if I'm familiar with public television, I would say, oh, PBS, like PBS Kids, that's a channel. And I would say, okay, well, this shows a lot of news, seems to be showing a lot of points of view. So I'm going to actually, even though this is Twitter, it's still a news source. I'll move this one aside for now. I'm going to put their Twitter feed under there. And then let's look at which sources show one point of view, which news sources are reliable. I have the Woonsocket Call. And this is super local. We got what's happening in Lincoln. We have Barville, so northern Rhode Island. And hey, my hometown, Woonsocket, they're going to get rid of that incinerator. Who knew? And, you notice all the French-Canadian last names, Irish last names. So this is local news. And I'm going to say this is reliable. It doesn't show the most stories, but it is reliable. And just to speed up the process, I would say, National Public Radio. My dad listens to that, but maybe my kids wouldn't say that. But I know if I was in school, I would say that. Fox News, I'm going to say they look at that site and they go, oh, that's Fox News. And Loose Cannon, and they might, if they look in, they might decide that, I think that this is only one point of view. A blog I would put in under one point of view as well, maybe. Or maybe I would think it's reliable. And Juneau Empire, I would look at and say, this is from Alaska. What are they looking at in Alaska? And this is like, tried to find something that was the equivalent of the Woonsocket Call from a place in Alaska. So I went with Juneau, the capital city. And that was it. So maybe I'd put that one in this column with these. And the Huffington Post, I decide, was the counter to Fox News. It's a left-leaning source. So now I have my 3 things organized. We've spoken as a group. We've discussed what the content is, why we think it belongs in that category. Now we're ready for part 2. So students have this worksheet, and they're going to work in groups, and they're going to complete these questions about what they see on their screen here. So we have, which news sources do you think have the most stories? Why? Pretty much they're answering, there's a typo. Pretty much they are answering about why they picked their headings. Then they look at one news source. So let's pretend I want to just look at National Public Radio. I'm going to open that. And then what is the news source? And students would write in National Public Radio. The purpose is, maybe I'd give sentence frames to my L's. The purpose is to show world news. Or maybe just show American news. I could say really anything. And then they're going to finish the questions with their group. So these are all just about NPR. This, as it says here, now choose one source to think about to answer 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then students are going to ask to think hard. I'm going to challenge them. What do they think news media will look like in the future? And they need to talk with their partner, discuss what it'll look like in the future. The last piece to this is to demonstrate their thinking. So after they have completed all of the worksheet, they've done this actually in hard writing, talking. They're looking at this Padlet. They're thinking about one source. Then it instructs them. They're going to go to the second one. They can type this in, choose the news 2. That's part 2. The directions are repeated. Same things that are on the worksheet, just for reference. And they are going to actually make a screencast to read out the questions, and they'll discuss their answers. So they could read what's actually on their worksheet. So this worksheet, they might read what they said, but explaining, clicking, using their voice. I want every student to contribute to the discussion, and I want them to be actually thinking through the questions and maybe taking them a little bit further. Maybe a student will read the question, another kid will chime in with something that they noticed later. After students have created the screencast, they'll post it to this page underneath, and this is in a blog format. And that's it.